Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Alana James, and it is my pleasure to have a longtime friend and colleague, a man who I worked for at two different universities, David Leisure, speak to us today about his latest work. David's very interested in how we learn and how we help other people learn better. And so, David, welcome back. Thank you very much for being here. And you were just saying something interesting about active learning. Would you repeat that?
Well, active learning is such a key to anyone's success, even if your professor doesn't encourage active learning, be an active learner. And in this case, I'm going to really lean on you all to be very active in the chat. Totally active, because if you're active in the chat, it means you're thinking about this and you're personalizing what you're hearing and you're coming up with the questions. The lecture format should be dead by now. So we're going to have a conversation instead of a lecture. And I really just want to present some ideas and have you engage with them and get going. And I'm just so glad to be here and love reaching out to you all and having a great time together. So let's get going. Do you want me to go ahead and dive in, Alana?
Yeah, go ahead and you have control of the slides. So I'm just sitting back and I will be active in the chat as well.
Okay, so if you haven't guessed by the picture, learning goes much better and productivity goes much better when you're positive. So I've got all these happy people here, and that's going to be the theme of what we talk about. But I have some questions for you. I'm going to put them up in polls instead of chat. So let's see where we are here. Okay, we'll open this one. Thank you for the answers. Got 2 yeses on the distraction and a no on whether, 3 no's on whether graduate school is worth it, and 2 occasionally having doubts. And we'll address some of that as we go through. And distraction is the bane of everyone's life nowadays, especially when you're technologically connected. There are so many big companies that make money off of your distraction that they're in opposition to your success. They want you to be distracted by them. So let's close that poll and we will come back and I'll ask the next one here. It asks the graduate question all over again, it looks like. But how much negative self-talk do you do? And we'll get into why that is so important. Yeah, thank you. It's I'm getting the answers I expected, a real dominance on I do a lot of negative self-talk. And we'll talk about how that can help you and how that can harm you, depending on the timing of the talk. And there's so much new fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging of the brain in different states, that they have learned so much about how our emotions affect everything we do. And so that's what we'll be talking about today too. And I'll come back to chat. So here's another question. I don't have a poll for this. It's I don't know where I'm going, but I sure know where I've been, hanging on the promises and songs of yesterday. And I've made up my mind I ain't wasting no more time. So, who said that? Yeah, D, thank you. All of the above. It's actually very true, all of the above, but that's an important emotion in itself. That's an example of a negative emotion that actually turns out to be positive. I ain't wasting no more time. It gets you moving, right? So here's a little more meat and potatoes for you rather than appetizer. So I want you to consider for a moment. This is an incredibly important self-discovery question. When have you felt an intense pull to explore and learn more? And I know you can read. To fully immerse yourself in your new discoveries and take in a feast of new ideas. So take about 30, 40 seconds here. Just think about it. I'll be quiet and look deep inside and write some of your discoveries. On your lit review for your PhD. Thank you, Patty. Passion for teaching. When I decided to pursue my graduate degree, I find that the more is start to understand a concept or idea, the more I want to know. Something less stressful than your PhD. Oh, I completely understand. There's a phenomenon when you've passed your proposal that everything looks more interesting than your proposal itself. And I think that's a self-protection mechanism. An essay by David Foster Wallace. Yeah, Eric, that's an interesting phenomenon too, how it can be just one thing that suddenly crystallizes that interest and gets you going. And the reason I'm asking this question of everybody, and I think it is so important, uh, is you need to remember what pulls you into this frame. And I won't say frame of mind, it's a frame of being. What pulls you into this so that when you need this, you can trigger it purposefully and not have it happen accidentally. And everybody will have a different approach to it, but it's a question I want you to consider for at least a couple of weeks here to notice when you're getting pulled into something and what the conditions are so that you can control the environment to create that happening. Working in the lab, says Nancy, and yes, working in industry often doesn't answer my curiosities either. And teaching young people and seeing them come on and be a part of it. Thank you for all those great answers. I'm going to suggest, and the fMRI support it, that there are really, in complexity theory, two attractors in your chaotic network in your brain. And it's good that there are attractors because it makes sense out of the complexity. But there's a positive attractor up here, the PEA, positive emotional attractor, and it helps you thrive. That is something that gives you this sense of curiosity and excitement, lets you dream big, imagine. And that was this question here of this guy. Or it's a negative emotional attractor, and it helps you survive. And it's really important to kind of take the negative out of negative here. It's a state of mind, even though it's called this, it's a state of mind that helps you take action. You don't need to think about it. You need to act. You need to protect yourself, get something done, run away from the white snake. And it was white snake that quote was from. But the thing is the big emphasis is on take action. You can actually use a negative state in your mind to get yourself kicked in the pants and moving forward. So sometimes it's that I've made up my mind, I ain't taking no more time. It's not going to be this way anymore. I've gotten truly into moving, but then you've got to shift back over here to the thriving part, because you need your full brain and your full capability to think and be open-minded and take risks. See, what the survive mode does is you avoid the risk. You're just trying to maintain what you've got. Whereas this side over here, if you really want to win big in life, right, you have to know when and how to take risks and do these things. So it's the ability to consciously move back and forth, which is really helpful in having you react. So this will be one of my most traditional slides here, but unfortunately, I just realized I flipped the order. I've got thriving on the left and surviving on the right, and I had it the other way. But one thing that's happening with the PEA is you're activating a different nervous system in your body, and it's not just in your brain. The parasympathetic is when you're social, when you're eating, it's your vagus nerve, which doesn't even come down your spinal cord. It comes down the front of your body and through your neck. Keeps you breathing, keeps your organs running, but it's associated with positivity and thriving and this open-mindedness. And the interesting thing is that it turns on neurogenesis. In other words, the creation of new brain cells and new pathways in your brain, and creates durable learning. You can't learn when you're stressed. You really just, it's hard to learn. So you've got to be able to bring yourself into a positive frame of mind. And one way to do that is thinking about hope, writing about your dreams, connecting with friends, feeling gratitude, and what they call autobiographical thoughts, which are, I'm thinking about myself. I'm thinking about my great future ahead of me and envisioning the success that I'm going to have. And on the other hand, the survival part, it activates a completely different nervous system, which is your flight or fight nervous system. And it suppresses the parasympathetic, and the parasympathetic suppresses the sympathetic nervous system. So the positive negative really is dichotomy like that. It's two different states that one will tend to dominate and turn off the other. And so that's what makes it difficult. And particularly since negative thoughts can ruminate around in our head, and they will be dominant because you were evolved to survive. And so the negative can override anything else that's going on. Doesn't matter how happy you are. If there's a lion coming up and attacking you, you got to do something about it. And it's not important to be positive right now. But it is important to switch back and forth. So fear, conflict, importantly, this word right here, because I saw some of the questions ahead of time that just going in to meet with a supervisor who is critical of your work, you feel evaluated and you get defensive. It's a fight or flight situation. So your learning turns off, your listening turns off, your open-mindedness shuts down, and you just want to survive it. And you don't get to fight and you don't get to flee. And some of them will actually require you to fawn, meaning kiss up to them, or freeze. A lot of us freeze. Those are the 4 F's besides the fight or flight too. So I will, anytime that while I'm talking you have a question, please feel free to chat it into the chat. I am watching the chat, and I will work it in at the right time. Here is the more scientific slide, actually, that shows the positive emotional attractor has 3 factors, and there's another mode in your brain called the default mode network, which is used when you're dreaming and socializing and things like that. Positive affect is this one, is when you're emotionally positive, as you might expect. And here is the parasympathetic PNS. It's called arousal. The psychologists use that word very differently than the mainstream, but it's your endocrine system. And if all 3 of these things are working, then you're going to get in a positive emotional attraction state. And the opposite is if you're having a bunch of negative emotions and your fight or flight system is triggered, and you're using what's called the task positive network, which is actually a really important network that you want to be able to use. It's for tasks that require a lot of detail and stick-to-itive, and you just need to get it done. Well, you're going to want to trigger that at times, right? Just get some stuff done, clear your plate, make progress, that type of thing. So there's a lesson in this slide about organizing your environment again to when do you need to be in this positive state and when do you need to be in this negative state. There's one thing I forgot to highlight back here, and that actually it fell off. This should be how do you like my typing? 3 to 6 times more frequent than the negative for optimal learning. And they've measured the learning while you're doing something positive or negative, and they measured it with the fMRI and found the optimal state is you do need the negative to get you moving and everything, and then you have to shift back to positive to make it worthwhile, to get the most out of that situation. So here's some more down the side here, and you can go back with the PDF. Alana, I'm assuming we share the PDF with everybody.
Yes, it's in the handouts. So everybody has access to the handouts.
Yeah, so I won't feel compelled to go through every point, but give you the bigger sweep of the slides then. And as we finish off that very scientific slide there of the 3 things that trigger the different states, where do you think positivity or negativity could be applied in your progress? When would you apply positive and when would you apply the negative, which is not necessarily negative again, right? It's the fight, flight, get moving, get active, get things done part, but not necessarily the learning part. The default mode network, Alana, is one of the first networks they noticed in the brain, and it is just one of the three components of a positive mind frame or mindset. It is the one that wanders and considers and is open-minded. It's even responsible sometimes for rumination, strangely enough, where the same thoughts keep coming back over and over, not necessarily negative, but you just keep focusing on certain things. So that's one component of the positive. And then the positive emotions down is another, coupled with getting that really biological sense. So that's why we love eating with people in a social group, is we can get our parasympathetic nervous system aroused. We can get the positive affect where we're happy to see people. And then that helps us activate the default mode, which pushes us into a positive state of mind. And then you can have some of those thrilling conversations. It's one of the downsides of online education, is the mediation by technology of some of the things that happen that we're not even aware of, because emotions operate on the order of a small number of milliseconds, whereas cognition operates 10 to 100 times slower. Your thinking is much slower than your feeling. And so you don't even feel it, but people together begin to synchronize and just be. And so I'll read some of your chats here. Deadlines, yes. Getting started writing, those are all good negative network things. And get in a panic mode even. See the difference between where you're at and where you thought you wanted to be, and go, oh my gosh, there's so much to do. And then shift over, correct. Meet your deadlines. That's why we use deadlines, right? Thank goodness for deadlines, because we actually can use those as what's called a forcing function in our behavior. We can set rewards, we can set penalties, we can set deadlines. We can do things that we can build habits around so that we can take the negativity out of it, but we can build those negative markers in our time management to help us really get used to doing what we need to do, and setting aside some of the idea that we have to be perfect along the way. PEA is useful definitely when attending seminars and doing research. It's useful anytime you have to be creative. And I agree, Misa, the criticism is a truly negative part of the negative mode. And so we have to learn to deal with that too, so that we can be learning while we're being criticized. And it's one of the hardest skills to learn, is turning evaluation into coaching in your mind. And the thing is to remember, nobody else knows you like you know you, and so they can be evaluating. It's like, who are you to evaluate me? I can hear what you're saying, and I'm going to take that and be selective about what you're saying. So if you listen with the intent that you're not being evaluated because you have this power of choice, and turn that choice on what's being said, then you can shift back into a positive mode. Yes, grad school seems to be about negative emotional attractor, doesn't it? Yes, and time does tend to be there, and we scare ourselves, Annalene. We scare ourselves because when we're working to a time pressure and we're working to a quality pressure at the same time, we can let that overwhelm us, and then we tend to freeze, not fight or flight, but the freeze action kicks in for us on our bioreaction. So there's been a lot of work in positive psychology. You may have heard of Angela Duckworth and Martin Seligman at the UPenn. They do a lot of work on the positive side of things, and they use a metaphor of the garden, which is the negative side. The negative emotions are like weeding, and you have to weed. But if all you're doing is weeding, what you wind up with is a bare patch of soil. It's about conserving what you have, whereas actually the positive side is nurturing yourself, nurturing your ideas, people around you, is like then planting and caring for the plants that you've planted. So you can think of weeding on the negative side and nurturing on the positive side. You need to feel safe, cared about, and be positive about your future in order to have a positive mindset. And here's the 3 to 6 times more positive than negative. And like we've been saying, shift back and forth. And they've come up with, and there wasn't time to put it in here, a whole measurement system called PERMA, which are the markers of positive life. And I can follow up with an email on PERMA and send that out to everybody. So first of all, what then kind of takes down our ability to be positive? And I'm going to say I've run multiple coaching groups for a year with academics. And those coaching groups, the hardest thing people have to overcome is the negative self-talk. They really bring themselves down. They bring down their confidence. They trigger their own negative states, and it undermines their self-efficacy and their motivation. In fact, one of the great things about the positive psychology is they found out that positivity is actually usually more effective for treating depression than any of the pharmacological approaches. So they saw that people who were positive weren't depressed, but they actually found the causative mechanism going the other way, that taking positive steps and increasing those things in your life will actually drive out the depression. And a depression is often a sense of powerlessness. So I don't know that you need to chat your negative self-talk. You don't have to expose that part. Just what I want to do is sensitize you to when you're doing negative self-talk. You should be doing it in a positive sense to trigger your negative mindset to get you moving. But otherwise, you should be kind to yourself and also not take the judgments of others. It's your judgment in life that counts, and even your judgment on your research, because ultimately you're the one that's going to own this and make the decisions about it. And you're incredibly capable, or you wouldn't be in grad school. You're incredibly capable because you're a successful adult, and you don't have to judge yourself against other people because they're on different development timelines, and you're working your way forward on your own timeline, and you can go as fast as you can go. I'm going to read your comment, Annaline. Oh, it's great to make your classes if you're responsible for teaching others. If you want to make your time worthwhile at all, if you want to have your purpose and meaning as a teacher, you have to maintain the positivity in there, and use the negative when you need to, but only when you need to, and a very light touch on it. Okay. Yes, one bite at a time. That's the negative comment. Thank you, Patty. And I'm going to now shift into 3 things you can do with this knowledge. You've already come up with a lot of it, so I feel like you're really on the way. Oh, and Ributsui, I'm not enough, or I am mediocre. I am engaging in self-talk during sustained periods of stagnancy. Yeah, and you're probably trying to get yourself moving. But I would say, find another message, be aware of that one, find what gets you moving, but is still maintaining an open door to the positivity that you want to be. Here is a website, the Greater Good Science Center at Berkeley, California. And you can look up Greater Good Science Center, and they've got probably 30 or 40 interventions there that are all research based, that are rated from, you can maybe see this, the difficulty is casual, how much time you have to spend on it, and how often you have to do it. This one has been proven over and over and over to work. It doesn't have to be at bedtime, but bedtime's a good time because you want to go to sleep with a positive frame of mind and have the brain working while you're asleep on positive things. So if you do that with the 3 good things that happened today, and my wife and I do that, we just talk it, but when you're getting started, it's helpful to write it, describe it, really capture those feelings. And what that's doing is increasing your awareness so that you can figure out how to feel that way again. And sometimes all you have to do is want to feel that way, and your brain will figure out how to get you to feel that way. Or if we let it do it, we don't have to explain it necessarily, but if we can explain it, then we can even help our brains do their job to get us in that place. And the most important one down there, and it's just like with negative self-talk, is to refocus your negative feelings. So when you say, I'm not capable of doing that, a simple way to reframe that is to add comma, yet, Y-E-T. I'm not capable of doing that yet, but I know that if I do this and I work hard, I'll get better at it. What you don't want is your negativity to flip and be a reason not to act. And that's when it becomes very destructive. So you can turn those negative statements into positive ones, and you get that practice by doing this. They found in an educational setting that if they got students to talk about 3 great things that happened during the school day in their writing, just a short, half-page essay during the day, and they did that for a week, that actually had a lasting effect for the whole school year, that it changed people's attention to what they're doing. And isn't it great that there's such a simple thing to do that can make such an impact for folks? And I agree, Alana, we don't hear that we're capable enough. There's another piece of research that the instructors on the exam papers, when they marked them, said, I'm giving you this feedback because I believe in you. And that's all they did. And that one intervention actually lasted semester to semester to semester in terms of the people who got it increased all of their scores by at least a letter grade. It's amazing what this can really do. And as academics, we tend to not put a lot of stock in emotions generally, or the things that feel squishy like that. And yet what we're learning, and we're backing it up with hard science, is it's absolutely imperative to think about this. Now, this is probably this slide represents the trajectory of your life. The orange dots are your real self, and it's real self at time 0. That's your birth. When you're a child, when you're 18, ... all the way up to who you are now. And it's useful to think about your real self because you can assess it or analyze it and extract the positive from that to say, what are the things I'm really good at? And if you remind yourself what you're really good at, what you enjoy, what you surprise yourself with, what gives you the will to get up in the morning and charge into the day, that's very much like the gratitude exercise. But now you can really charge into the day and know what it is that drives you. And not only that, you can come out here all the way to the right to the I may as well draw a little happy face here. Your ideal self is your future state. Way out there, maybe when you look back at retirement, you can look back on your life and say, I'm going to make a bigger smile. Kind of creepy, maybe. But you can look back from retirement and say, this is who I want to be when I've grown up. It's less about what and it's more about who. Who is the person I'm going to become? And you can talk about your ideal self in order to plan your next self. Now, this sounds a lot like life coaching, probably, and it is a life coaching formula. But what we've found is that you need to live in alignment with who you really are, what really matters to you. And you can build that ideal self. Like I look back on my career and I've helped thousands of students. I've discovered some amazing things. I have a wonderful relationship and I'm financially not rich, but I'm secure and I don't have to worry about things. And my grandkids are all around me and I'm loving them and being positive. That would be my vision for myself at retirement. And then I can say, okay, so if that's my vision and who I want to be and it represents my values, then my next self, whether it's a month from now or a year from now, if I think about my next self and I make it movement toward my ideal self, well, okay, I wanted to be an academic. I wanted to be an academic since I was 9 years old. I used to skip grade school and run up to the university and hang out in the labs with the graduate students and ask them endless questions. But so I was a bad student doing good things. But your next self can be those next steps, like you've got to finish your dissertation, and why do you need to do that? To finish your degree, so why do you need to do that? If you have a chain of benefit out there to your ideal self, you will find that you are much more focused and much more motivated. And you can even say, you know, this stuff and that stuff, that doesn't help me. I'm going to stop doing it. You can become much more prioritized, much more focused, but not from a negative perspective, but from a positive perspective, because you want to spend more time doing what moves you forward to your ideal self. The bugaboo here is the ought self. That's what other people think you should be or ought to be. And that's why I have a little X over that. Unless your ought self agrees with your ideal self, and it happens in maybe 1 or 2% of the cases, your ought self is definitely not good for you. And that's when you find a lot of times you're doing the negative self-talk is to whip yourself into your ought self. And don't do that to yourself. I beg you, please do not try to force yourself into your ought self if it doesn't agree with who you want to be. It's a recipe for unhappiness. So if you're wondering how you can design your ideal state. You can do this for any time period of your life. You might do it for next year, right? What do you want to have next year versus the end of your life in terms of all of these octants? I was going to say quadrants, but octants. In terms of your family and friends, your life partner, growth. A lot of you are heavily investing in this area of growth and contribution to the world. It's mental quadrant, but this is growth, learning, development, knowledge, accomplishment, things like that. So it's beyond the wealth piece, which tends to be where a lot of people start thinking about their life. But money doesn't make you happy. That's one of the things out of positive psychology. Lack of money makes you unhappy, but when you've met your sufficiency, more money doesn't make you happier unless you're using it for growth, contribution, and these other areas that are on this diagram. So yeah, I put some technical stuff on here I'm developing, but it's okay to ignore that. What I want to do is get back to your active learning and ask you, if you had to tell someone in an elevator ride, you're just going up to the 10th floor, not the 39th floor, what would you tell them that you want to be? And they ask you, who do you want to be when you are done with school, say? So chat that in there. And I'll go back a slide so you can see some of the categories that are possible to have goals within. Or you can just stick to the growth category. The other thing you can do is rate yourself. Am I a 1, 2, 3, 4, or a 5? With the idea that you set up your own criteria and allow yourself to track your progress over time. You want to be a voice for positive change. That's a really good, tight, worthwhile, ideal self. And I'm not judging the statement on the merits of your choice. It's your choice to be a voice for positive change. But I like how you've captured that, Patty, and feel like you really mean it. Person at peace with my family, community, and work life. Professor at a small liberal arts school, showing the creative and playful side of math. I want to come take your course. A provocative leader and a kind, loving person. See, one thing we're learning from these is that when you think about who you want to be, you can be specific to a certain point, and you need to have a concrete vision, but you also need to have that sense of who you are no matter what point you're at in that continuum, because things are going to change. Your actual vision of the concrete details will unfold before you in life, but who you become can be completely under your control, because it's the inner world that you're controlling about who it is that you're becoming. And then you still need to influence the outside world, but So that's a good thing to ask yourself at least once a year, and then throughout the year, remind yourself and to actually fill it out much more completely. Like for each of these areas, say what it is you want to be, how important it is to you, and why you want to be that. And then you can start to use this more complicated 7-step process, which is not so bad once you see the bigger picture on it, which is you use your real self to figure out who you are, where you've been. And I'm going to emphasize as you do that, and you've envisioned your ideal self already, you've talked about some of your past self and who you are. It's so important to stay positive on number 3, to assess your strengths as to who you are and what are those strengths that I have. Particularly, they're called strengths because they align with my values and give me the capability to do and become what I want. And when you've done that, you've got your ideal self or your ideal project even, and your strengths of who you are, then you can come in and say, well, there's a gap, but the gap isn't a deficit. The gap is an opportunity. It's really important to stay positive during this. It's not because you're lacking, it's because you have this opportunity to build on your strengths to go further. And that's really, the research shows, the only way you can develop to go forward is be kind. Have a great vision of who you want to be so you don't limit yourself. Assess your strengths so you build on what's within you, and then look at the opportunities you have for making the greatest forward movement. And then when you start doing that, you can look at short term. Yeah, that's the big term, the difference between my real self and my ideal self. Short term, it's like get my degree done. And you want to select those 1 year or 6 months, you can pick the time period opportunities. And then you have to look at what's in my way. Finally, you can start talking about the negatives, but it's likely not within yourself. What are the resistors that are out there? Unless you have self-limiting beliefs. If you think, I'm not up to this, I'm inadequate, oh, I could never do that, who do I think I am? Then those are internal resistors that you need to overcome, which you can do by focusing on your strengths and watching yourself grow. And then you also need to identify the promoters, the people in your life that are going to help you, the actions in your life, the support, controlling your environment. If you don't control your environment, it will certainly control you. So look at how you can bring more promotion into your life, and then you'll be a lot more successful at reaching your next self. So that was step 6. And step 7 is always make sure you schedule some time to look back and appreciate your progress. You have to appreciate the progress, even if you don't do everything you want. Because I would rather aim high and challenging and miss, but come in higher than I would have if I'd played it safe. So I don't mind missing a goal that I know was truly a stretch goal, as long as I tried really diligently to achieve it. And I learned from the situation what was possible and what I learned about how to reach where I did reach, and then reapply that in the next time period so that my next self, after my +1 self, my +2 self, is even going faster and reaching my goals faster. My goals keep moving as I learn. So that's one of the lessons too. Nothing is static here. And thank you for the comment, Rubitsway. And that may come back to this, because I know there was a number of questions on how to write. and how can you use the NEA and the PEA to write. And this is the positive side, and this is the negative side. So if you split your writing into two parts, you can write positively and remove all the negativity from it by just writing what you're thinking, and try to write as fast as you can, because normal writing slows your brain down and punishes your brain for being too creative, because it's getting in the way of being correct, right? So you want to set that negativity aside. You don't have to be perfect when you're writing to think. What you have to do is write to think. In other words, you want to discover what's going on in your head, and you're using writing to make your thoughts visible. And so you can just sit down with a piece of paper, set a timer, and go for it, and get all your thoughts down on paper. That's not even a draft, right? That's not the same as a draft over there. And you can do that to create an outline. You can do that to create content. But if you separate it into, it's like the old talk about brainstorming, is we just want to hear the things we think we could do. We don't want to criticize those things. We want to see what it is we think we could do and be very creative. And then we can come back with a second phase, which is writing to communicate. And we can circle those ideas, and we can put them in the right places that they would go in our communication, so that it's possible for someone else to follow what we do. And this is such a powerful tool. When we do it with students, we actually set them down. Sometimes, Eric, it's 15 minutes, 25 minutes. I'll explain in a bit where that comes in. And it's so powerful. Students begin by writing like 2 pages in 15 minutes. And by the time we're done coaching them and helping them to realize how powerful a technique that is, they're up to 8 or 10 pages in 15 minutes. And the thoughts are just coming out, and they're really amazed by the quality of their own thinking. And then they can reflect on it and take that productivity and be selective and arrange it into a meaningful piece of writing. So the point of timing is really the number is not as important as actually timing yourself sometime. If you want to get better at something, and particularly where you want to capture your writing at the speed of thought, time how many pages you can write in X number of minutes, and you will actually subconsciously and consciously get better at it. Now, this is my most complicated slide, and I feel like we're probably running out of time to cover it. And I don't know, Alana, if you've done Kanban flow in other webinars, but I would encourage folks to check it out. This is, to my mind, and Alana introduced me to this, and I've been using it for 2 years since she told me about it. It is so helpful to organize your work of what you need to do, and then on a daily basis pick out 1 to 3 things that you must do today that are reasonable, and then as you're doing them, focus on one thing at a time until it's done, and then move that thing over here into this column, done. And along the way, there's what's called a Pomodoro timer, and that's Italian, I think, for tomato. It starts at, because they used a tomato-shaped timer. It starts at 25 minutes and counts down, and it says, no, you've got to be busy for 25 minutes. It's only 25 minutes. Set it aside, and for that 25 minutes, you do what it is you said you would do. And rather than thinking about the quality or anything else, you just work to your best ability in that 25 minutes, so that you don't have those pressures on top of you of, oh, I've got to get this done, da, 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 da. Just manage your time so you have enough Pomodoros in your life to do what you need to do. And then get in the habit, not of thinking about all of the scary things about the work that you need to accomplish, because that actually sticks you in a negative mode. It may get you moving, but it sticks you in a negative mode and prevents you from making progress. So you've got to have that the component of the negative, which I think the kanbanflow.com gives you that structure and the negativity to see and visualize. And actually, it kind of gamifies your work and then allows you to slip into, for this 25 minutes, I'm going to be very positive and I'm going to get done with it. Or I'm going to go into my task positive network and just check things off. Boom, 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 boom. You can decide, is this a get or done Pomodoro, or is this I'm going to think of really cool ideas and do this, like we split the writing up, Pomodoro. Which way do you want this Pomodoro to be? And you can choose what you need to do and use your emotions to back you up. And that's where I will stop, other than here's my summary slide. We're all going to run into challenges in life, and it's amazing what we can accomplish when we believe we can accomplish it. And when we set ourselves to accomplish it and don't accept the constraints, we can handle them. Sometimes we've got to recruit our allies in to help us to overcome the resistors. But by staying 3 to 6 times more positive than negative and being positive on average, we can do this. By the way, Americans average 2 negative for every positive during a day. And Finns average 4 positive to 1 negative. So something about Finland, they're 4 times as positive as negative on average, whereas Americans are twice as negative as positive. Oh, yes, Patty, definitely academic writing can be done that way. So I'm don't have a huge amount of time, but I am open for a question or two. And I've just loved being with you all, and thank you for interacting so much in the chat. And your thoughts really do matter. They matter to me, but they matter most to you in terms of getting them out there and seeing them and feeling your own voice.
So, David, when I go to bed tonight, one of the things I'm going to think is that this webinar is one of the 3 really great things that happened for me today.
Cool. That's very cool. And I am too. This has been a great way to start my morning, and you're a little closer to bedtime. Thank you, Annaline. That's that if you don't know that you can't do something, you can achieve the impossible. It's so true. And if you can dream it, you can do it.
So I know I'm going to put up, this will go up on our doctoral net sites, our pd.education sites for the university people, and I'll put it up on the open educational resource as well in the next few weeks. And I'm going to pass it out to all of my deans to see if they want to send it on to in their inner university systems, because I think, and I think everybody in the room would agree, this is the kind of inspiration we all need sometimes to help us when we are looking too many of those negatives in the face, to help remind us that we're in control here.
Yeah, you can choose how you feel.
And bring in that positive if we just remember that we have it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Alana, and everyone. It's been such a good time with you all.
Absolutely fabulous. So we'll pass the word, and as we get more questions and whatever, I will let you know. And as you have more developments, you better tell us about them and come back
I
again.
will. I will. Thank you. And thank you for the comment, Ribotswe.
So I'm going to leave the room open. I have another webinar in a group talking about negotiation in about 15 minutes. But if people want to ask questions,
Yeah, I'll hang out for 15 minutes.
okay,
Absolutely.
let's make it 10. That'll shut down one room and open the next one.
Okay, great. Thank you, Annaline and Patty. Thank you, Misa. Bye, Alana. Thank you, Nancy. Eric, I appreciate it. Thank you, Vanessa. Best of luck, everybody, and best of positive mindset in your work to come. We're going to do amazing things, aren't we? Make the time you spend amazing, and do that with your ideal self out there in the future. Well, I love that quote, Patty. If you think you are beaten, you are. Yeah, the five selves, Annalene, is not my invention. There's a gentleman at Case Western, Richard Boyatzis, who talked about that in one of his papers. So I'll put a short bibliography together and of resources and give that to Alana as well if you want to get some more reference on that. And if you think you dare not, you don't. Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. Yeah, definitely, Annalene, I'll do that. And also put up some links for self-administered positivity and strength finders that are free. It helps people assess where they're at and to identify their strengths in their positivity too. And I have to say, I'm just so thankful to Alana and to Doctoral and Masters Net. I've known her for over 15 years now and just learned so much from her along the way. When we talk about allies, Alana is truly one of mine and always taught me new things and made me think and challenged me. She's so good at that. We need our role models too, right? Oh, I want to be like her. Well, I think that's about it. So I'll exit the webinar now and let everyone get back to what you're doing and go forward. Don't forget your 3 gratitudes tonight. Thank you, Annaline.